brave girl, how you do the things that you do.
So how do you start or make boundaries? Like, how do you start doing that? Mm-hmm. How do you start putting the fence up?
Yeah, so when we look at it on like this kind of broad perspective, it really is about learning to own your own world, learning to really like take it as yours. I even to the point of befriending the parts of yourself that you don't like, being able to just own it. I think that's really kind of that the biggest part, or that is the work. That is the work. And then there are other ways that you can, I could sit and kind of give you a list of do these steps to implement a boundary, but that's just steps.
So here's an example of one. Like you brought up before about the common issue is like one person being swallowed up by the emotions of another.
Yes.
So let's put ourselves in that situation. So we're having an argument with our spouse. Maybe we're swallowing them up with our emotions, or they're swallowing up with their emotions. Maybe we're both doing it to each other.
Yep.
If we were to be the ones to want to stop this
Yep.
and say, okay, we can't do this anymore.
Yep.
What might be something that we can do? Let's say that we're the one who is being swallowed up by the emotion. What can we do in that situation to start establishing a boundary?
So the first step is always to breathe. It's always bring yourself back into your body. Understand or become aware of what's happening in your body. We kind of, when we get into those escalations, or when we feel like we're getting swallowed up, we kind of lose touch with ourselves a little bit. So it's very much breathing does that. So take some breaths, slow it way, way down, because when we start getting escalated, we go fast. We want to go fast. So it's slowing it down, improving your kind of awareness, and then check in with the story. What am I telling myself right now? What's the story I'm telling myself about me? What am I telling myself about my husband in this moment? Am I saying things like, my life is so hard and he needs to be helping? Or am I saying things like, my life is hard, but I'm a capable person. I would like it if my husband would just see that, right? That's a different story.
How do you communicate that boundary? Like, I guess, like, you have your partner and you feel like you need those boundaries. Like, how do you sit down and communicate that boundary?
Yeah, so boundaries can be internal or external, right? So typically, when we're talking about emotional boundaries, we're talking about internal boundaries that don't even necessarily need to be communicated with your husband. You're not asking him to do something different. You're holding yourself differently.
You're not like, I'm going to go take 3 deep breaths now.
Yeah.
You just go take 3 deep breaths.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me
So
too.
my husband and I, we could trigger each other pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And it's due to our own like childhood issues, right?
Absolutely.
And so my husband will say something that's maybe he can be a little harsh sometimes with his words. And what happens is when he says something that I find harsh, and maybe he didn't even mean for it to be harsh, that's just how he is sometimes. What would happen with me is inside my head, I would go things like, he doesn't love me, he doesn't hear me, he doesn't understand me, and then that's rehearsing in my head, and then it shuts me down. Then I give him the silent treatment because he doesn't love me, and he doesn't understand me, and he doesn't listen to me, and then now he's like, what the heck is going on? Now I'm getting the silent treatment.
Where'd you go? Yeah.
And so, and then we get in this vicious cycle. And what I was so tired of it. This was like last year during COVID. Oh my God, COVID. Bring out
You and everyone else.
Yeah, I had nowhere to go.
During COVID.
Yeah, and we have a business together, so you can imagine like we're just like 100%. And I was talking with one of my friends, and she didn't use that word boundary, but that makes a lot of sense. She basically told me, like, think about what you're thinking when he says those things, and then ask yourself, is that really, really true? Like, you know your husband.
Yep.
You know how much you love him, how much he loves you, and all those things. And sometimes she said it's basically reminding yourself that those aren't true. Yeah. It's like, okay, what he said felt very unloving, but I know my husband loves me.
Right.
What he said made me feel like I wasn't understood, but I know that and reminding yourself those truths. And then she said that I probably, if I do that, I may not shut down as much. And I have to say, it totally helped. And it actually was able to help me be able to verbalize and say, okay, I just need a break right now. I'm feeling very this, or very that, and then maybe we can come back to this too later. And it de-escalated much more quickly when I reminded myself like what I'm lying to myself about.
Yes, because we tell ourselves those stories when we're feeling scared or that the relationship is in a threatening place. the story changes, right? So you can be married to the biggest jerk one moment and the most amazing person the next. Because and it depends on the state. It depends on your state and what's happening in the relationship, right? So it's state dependent. If you are feeling upset, if you're feeling disconnected from him, you're going to think he's a jerk. Or you could more easily think he's a jerk.
I think we're so emotional. Like, you know what I mean? So when your husband's coming at you, that person that's supposed to love you and saying things at you, I don't think your mind, like, works to where it's just like, he loves me, da-da-da. It's just like, you just, like, especially if you've been having a hard time and a hard day and those are coming. And sometimes it is, like, I do realize, like, if I will lose it, but then just, like, okay, this is not personal. You know what? I'm not going to claim it. I am not going to claim that I'm this person. So... you can say it all you want, but I am not going to take
And that's
that.
a good point, because then we become somebody that we don't even like.
Oh,
Like, because
yeah.
we react, we get triggered, we do these things, and it's like, who is this person that I'm being?
Yes.
And now your spouse is experiencing this awful person, so they've got their whole story. So I'm sure you're seeing in your counseling two different sides of, like, she's always this, well, he's always that, and each one of us feels so justified because the other person meant to do it, you know. But I don't think most of the time we mean to.
Right.
Okay, Michelle, so what do you do after you check your story?
Yeah, so the next, at that point, you're able to lean into your partner or your significant other's experience, right? I like to do that by basically saying, it's not about me. Let me lean into their experience. Let me get curious about what's happening for them, rather than it reflecting on who I am. So him getting upset doesn't mean something about me, it means something about him. So if I can say, okay, what's happening? And even asking him, what's happening for you right now? Rather than me personalizing it. That's a really good way to de-escalate it, right? And that's giving him the space to feel, again, back to those emotional boundaries, his own feelings. You're not trying to take them on yourself, you're not trying to fix them, and he's not trying to get you to take them. So by you being able to, that's that separation that's so necessary.
I love that.
I love that too.
And after that point, after you like really lean in and really get curious about it, there is a point when you need to understand that you've done as much as you can do, right? So all you can do is offer support. You can't solve it for that person. So being able to say, okay, like this is the point where I can leave and I can resume life, where it's not so consuming that it's impeding functioning outside of what's happening in that interaction, right? So just being able to step away. The way that I learned to do this was with my clients, because I have 50 minutes with a client. They come in and they sit down, they share what's happening for them, and in that 50 minutes, I can lean in, I can get curious, I can help, I can understand, but I can't solve it for them. I can't fix it for them. And I have to trust that when they leave the room, they're going to be capable of solving it or be capable of carrying what they need to carry. And I have to be able to release it in a way that I can be ready for my next client, so that I have the ability to step into another us park with a different person and be able to fully engage in that way.
Okay, question for you.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about asking, asking that person, what are you feeling right now, right? And so let's say they said, okay, I'm feeling this, and so you realize it comes out like, when you say these things, I feel this. Okay. So now, what do you do from there? Is it because, like, on one hand, I can see the other person going, oh, okay, well, then I will try not to say those things or say it in that way anymore because I don't want to trigger you.
Yeah.
But I can see another type of personality say, well, what I said was not wrong. That's your problem. You need to figure out how to handle that better.
I've never heard that before.
Right?
Yeah.
So is there a right answer to that?
Yeah, well, it comes from a different place. It comes from a place of judging or a place of curiosity. So if you're saying, that's your problem, you need to fix that, that's coming from a place of judging on what's what and how they need to be solving it. If you're coming at it from, wow, I noticed that something just came up for you. What is happening? Where did this come from? That's coming from a very different place of being curious and wanting to understand them. We as humans, that's what we want. We want to be understood. We want to be seen. no matter what interaction we're happening, no matter the words that we're saying, the way that we're saying them, that's always what we're needing. Yep.
I feel like my biggest takeaway from you is that in your marriage, if you're struggling with your husband or you're struggling in your marriage, focusing on you as an individual is the best way to heal your marriage. Because if you get curious about your own emotions and why you're having those thoughts, maybe negative thoughts about your husband or different problems in your relationship, there's nothing you can do about him, right? You can't control him. You can't make him act a certain way or make him feel a certain way. But you can challenge your own story, like you said, and you can get curious about where he's coming from, and it starts with you.
And I think also if you take the NU, once you go with NU, then you're able to more like become logic. Then you can have a sit down and be like, hey, this is what I'm going through, this is what, and I think it's more likely to have a conversation where the emotion is not so high and being so defensive, because you have work it through yourself to realize like this is where I'm at. But I think it should be shared. Like this is where I'm at. Like this is what's going on with me. Like you know. So yeah, I love that.
Awesome. We all owe Michelle for a free session. Thank you so much. So Michelle, where can our viewers find you?
Yeah, probably find me easiest on Michelle Pomeroy _therapy on Instagram. I also host a little podcast, a little local podcast where I interview other therapists and help people kind of get an idea of who they are to see if they might be a right fit for them in working with them.
Therapist matchmaker?
I'm like a therapist matchmaker.
I love it.
Yeah.
What's the podcast name?
It's called The Right Fit.
The Right
Wow,
Fit.
I love it. And do you interview therapists of all kinds, like not just couples therapists, but others as well?
I love that.
Great.
I've actually listened to it and I love it.
Oh,
because
thank you.
I obviously feel like my main need right now is couples therapy, but in talking to these other ones, I'm like, oh, take away from that, take away from that.
Yeah,
you know, it's really good.
It seems like I think with couples therapy or with marriage issues, there is, as we're kind of talking about it, like there's self issues, and I think that's awesome that you see each person of the marriage individually as well as together, because it's a very complex.
Yeah, man.
Well, thank you for joining our brave conversation.
Have some brave topics you'd like us to discuss? Leave your suggestions below. We'd love to hear from you.
And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell notification so that you don't miss our next episode. We will be having more exciting guests.
Are you ready for more? Click on the next video for more brave conversations.
See you next week.
Hey, brave girl, how you do the things that you do?